Greetings, fellow ghouls, and thanks for stopping by on this stormy evening. Things have been getting rather interesting here at Litchfield Asylum. I just recently met Dr. Litchfield himself, and let's just say that his bedside manner leaves something to be desired. He's cutting off people's craniums and removing parts of their brains, turning them into the mindless orderlies here at his derelict facility. It looks like I'm up next. I need to figure out a way out of here, and fast. In the meantime, though, would you like to hear another true scary story? I've got one all picked out for us. Yes, come, get comfortable, and I'll tell you the tale of the old gym. In high school, I was a theater kid, or at least, I wanted to be one. By sophomore year, I'd been in 4 shows, albeit in the chorus or other background roles. That fall, I anxiously awaited the announcement of the musical auditions, where our drama teacher, Mr. Lucas, would announce what show we'd be doing. Even if it was just another chorus role, I knew that I wanted to try out. I walked by the bulletin board outside the theater late one afternoon on my way home from school. Mr. Lucas had posted the announcement for the auditions. Our fall show was The Music Man, a show I'd heard of but really knew nothing about. Auditions were next week at the usual spot, our high school theater, which was a very old auditorium. The auditorium was so old, in fact, that it barely functioned. A number of the seats were broken or squeaked loudly during performances. The sound system was always malfunctioning, with microphones cutting out mid-show and sometimes even mid-song. Even the stage itself was falling apart. One of the leads in the musical that past spring had stepped on a rusty nail during Tech Week. Mr. Lucas had been complaining about the various problems with the space for years, but, at least in my time at the school so far, nothing had ever been done to fix them. That all changed that fall. I showed up at tryouts the next week with a few of my friends and did my best to show off my very limited vocal ability. Truthfully, I didn't really care about what role I got, but mostly just enjoyed hanging out with all of my friends. Play practice was usually 3 nights every week after sports, and a great excuse to put off homework for a bit. At the end of tryouts, Mr. Lucas gathered us all around for a special announcement. The school had finally found the money to fix up the auditorium, and they would be doing some construction for the next few months on the rest of the building as well. While that was great news, those few months of repairs, upgrade, and construction would leave us without a workable auditorium. As such, we'd be relocating for the fall season to another building on the opposite side of our high school campus. Tucked behind one of our athletic fields was a large brick building we referred to as the old gym. For many years it had been our high school's biggest gym, but ever since they redid the athletic fields and built a bigger, newer gym, the old one just sort of sat there. Occasionally we'd still use it. I ran cross-country, and sometimes we'd have to run inside in the colder months, but it was mostly just an extra building. People would smoke behind it, too. And yet, it was the old gym that would be repurposed as our stage for The Music Man. Mr. Lucas had already had Mr. Ballard, our theater tech, working on a stage in the main gym area. My friends and I all groaned a bit. It was nice to have the promise of a new auditorium, a new sound system, new seats, but the old gym was on the other side of campus, a bit of a walk from where we usually met. Also, it was somewhat dingy on the inside, not really cared for properly in recent years. Mr. Lucas shrugged, assuring us all that it was our only option, and that for the duration of the Music Man rehearsals and performance, we'd have to make do. The following week, the cast list went up on the same bulletin board outside the auditorium. I was just one of the townsfolk again, but my character had a name. Sure, I'd be singing in the background for most of the show, but this specific character had a vocal solo during 2 separate songs. This was definitely the most responsibility I'd ever been given during a show, though I was slightly disappointed to think that I'd be performing this larger role in a makeshift stage constructed in a defunct gym hidden in the back of campus. I showed up to the first rehearsal the next week, and my jaw dropped. Mr. Ballard had really gone all out and completely taken over the main gym area. He'd already begun building the frame of the new stage, and from the looks of it, it was going to be just as big, if not bigger, than our regular stage when all was said and done. This was way more than I had imagined, but Mr. Lucas said that the school had actually given him a pretty decent budget to turn the old gym into the new auditorium. It wasn't only for the play, after all, but also for the weekly assembly and other school events. It all made sense, but still felt like an unfamiliar amount of commotion in the old gym. Have you ever heard of the theory that construction can actually stir up paranormal activity? Some say that when you mess with an old building, you can potentially disturb the spirits within. Though I wasn't familiar with this theory then, my time at the old gym that fall led me to look into it. Sports at my school ended at 5:30 in the evening, and play practice started at 6. We'd often go until 9 or 9:30 at night. Sometimes you'd be called for a whole rehearsal, but only needed for one scene, so there would be a fair amount of downtime. I guess what I'm trying to say is that fall, I spent a lot of time in the old gym, at night, sometimes with others and sometimes alone. I'll share a few of my experiences with you now. My first creepy encounter at the old gym was a strange one. While the stage was still being built, we used this separate area next to the gym as our backstage area. Various building materials, flats, and props were kept in this area, which filled up rather quickly as rehearsals continued. One cold fall night after rehearsal had ended, and my friends and I were walking away from the old gym, I realized that I'd left one of my notebooks back inside. I'd been doing homework in that backstage area, and could picture exactly where I'd left my notebook, on a gray folding table with a number of props on it. I told my friends, Daniel and Brian, to continue onward without me, and that I had to go back to grab my notebook. I hurried back through the darkness to the old gym, where thankfully the side door was still open. "Hello?" I called out into the main gym area. The lights were still on, but it seemed like everyone else had left. I walked back through the gym, marveling at the stage, which had graduated from a wooden frame to a fully functional platform, and found my way into the backstage area. There it was, my notebook, a bright red cover with my name on it, lying on the table, right where I'd left it. I picked it out from amongst the props, threw it in my backpack, and started back out into the main gym area. As soon as I left the backstage area, though, I heard a strange noise. It took me a second to notice it, but it sounded like some kind of metallic rattling. It got closer as I stepped into the main gym and passed by the wooden platform of the stage. It was that same irregular metallic rattling, like someone was jiggling the door. My ears pinpointed the source of the sound, the door to the gym, the same one I'd passed through to come back inside. I looked over and saw it wiggling in place, like someone was on the other side, trying to open it. My mind played catch-up with my body as I walked over to the door, not sure exactly what was going on. I pushed open the metal door to see my 2 friends on the other side. Daniel and Brian looked worried. "Are you okay?" they asked me. "We heard screaming." "Huh?" I responded. "I wasn't screaming." Apparently, the 2 of them had been continuing on their way when they'd heard some kind of distressed screaming and shouting coming back from the old gym. They thought I was in some kind of trouble, so they ran back to see what was the matter. When they'd gotten to the side door, they'd found it locked, which was strange, since I had just used it moments ago. Daniel and Brian both insisted that they'd heard a distressed voice coming from inside the building, which was extra strange since I was inside the whole time and didn't hear a thing. The three of us poked around in the old gym for a few minutes, calling out to see if anyone was still in there, only to be met with silence. Eventually we left and all went home. On another occasion, I showed up to rehearsal a bit early. I happened to be the first one there that day. The stage was coming along nicely. It was fully constructed by this point, and now Mr. Ballard was working on decorating it for the Music Man show. Additionally, rows and rows of chairs had been added to the gym floor for audience seating. I sat down in one of these seats and messed around on my phone for a bit while waiting for everyone else to arrive. I still remember the stage vividly. On the completed wooden platform were a number of props left out from the previous night's rehearsal. If you don't know the show, a number of instruments feature rather prominently as props, and that evening there was a small pile of these prop instruments on the stage. Next to them were a few wooden chairs and also a music stand. It was one of those torso-high stands with a platform for sheet music on it. It was old, metal, and pretty sturdy. I was sitting out in the audience for only a few minutes when I heard a sudden loud crash from the stage. The music stand had fallen over. I jumped up from my seat. There was no one on the stage. "Hello?" I called out. "Is someone there?" But there was no response. I told myself that the hastily built stage maybe just wasn't completely level, and that the stand had just naturally fallen over somehow, but that explanation never quite satisfied me. My scariest personal experience, though, happened later, when the show was just a week or two away from opening night. The stage had been set, and there were now numerous lights added to the gym that Mr. Ballard could control from a dimming board off to the side. We were rehearsing our songs while Mr. Ballard timed out the lighting cues on the board. This was towards the end of rehearsal one night, probably around 9 o'clock. We were rehearsing one of my big songs that night, one with my solo in it. There were maybe 7 or 8 of us on stage with Mr. Ballard off to the side. With the bright lights on us on stage, it was difficult to see out into the dark gym beyond and the seats of the audience. As the 8 of us on stage were singing together and practicing our blocking, with the bright lights shining on us, I happened to look out and see Mr. Lucas in the back of the gym, standing behind the chairs. He would sometimes watch and listen to the rehearsal from back there to see how the sound was carrying in the space and whether us performers were projecting enough for his liking. About halfway through the song, it was almost time for my solo. I was nervous, but ready. I looked out to Mr. Lucas in the back of the gym, preparing to project enough to impress him when I noticed something strange about the silhouette in the back. Again, it was hard to tell with the light in my eyes, but it looked taller and slimmer than him. Actually, it didn't even look like him at all. It looked like, "And you missed your entrance. Okay, let's start it from the top." Mr. Lucas walked over from the side of the stage. He'd been there the whole time, watching the blocking up close. He hadn't been at the back of the gym at all. Mr. Ballard reset the lighting cue, dimming down the bright spotlight that was interfering with my vision. I looked at the back of the gym where I'd seen the eerie person standing behind the chairs, but there was nobody there. They just disappeared. There was no one else in the old gym that night apart from us, especially not anyone who could simply vanish into thin air. Other people in the show had their own experiences in the old gym, but I'll save a few of them to tell you another time. Eventually, we all started calling the place haunted. During our second performance of the show, one of the girls slipped and hit her head on stage and got a concussion. After that, we started calling the place cursed as well. We were glad to move out of there for the spring play season, and back into our newly renovated theater. Ooh, another twisted tale of terror. A ghost hanging out in the back of the auditorium. It's so rude when the audience boos your performance. Oh, well, it seems like it's time for me to go back to my cell. Do me a favor, would you, fellow ghouls? Try to think of a way for me to escape this asylum before I turn into one of these bare-brained monsters. No offense, that is. Anyway, do come back and see me again sometime soon, and I'll have another true scary story waiting for you. Good night.